Hi, friends. Welcome back to Area 312 Rock and Metal Vodcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kent, along with my co-host,
Rex,
and our other co-host.
Hi.
And today, friends, we have a legend with us, Mr. Timothy Gaines. Welcome, Timothy.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Going good.
Good.
Thank you
Good to
so
be
much
here.
for gracing us with some time, and we're very honored, and it's so good to see you again. We're pretty stoked. Timothy,
Glad to be here.
if you don't mind, you have such a wonderful history, and we're just going to go through it all here as best as we can. And we just always like to start at the beginning, if it's okay. And our first question is, I believe you grew up as a PK, as a preacher's kid, and I was just wondering, were your parents supportive of your rock and roll endeavors as you were growing up?
Yeah, they were, which is surprising because I have other friends who are PKs, and it was not the same story for them. But my family is very musical. My dad's brother was a nightclub performer, played jazz, put out albums in the 60s, and was on his way to becoming, one of the performers before his tragic death in '67. So we've had music in our family for a long time. My dad played trombone in school and then sang bass in college in quartets, and my mom on piano. And I've got two older sisters that play music, and a younger brother who is a singer and songwriter in a metal band. And so yeah, we've had music around. And I'd have to say my sisters, because of their influence and the music that I listened to through them, was probably another reason why my parents supported. And my mom in general supported music. The music, tried to get me involved with music early on in school. And gosh, piano, I was playing piano, I think around 4 years old. I was banging on the keys, and my cousin showed me my first chords. And so yeah, we've had it around, and they encouraged it. And they would take me to, when I wasn't even old enough to drive, my dad would drive me to gigs, or he'd pick me up. I'd give him a phone call at 2 in the morning, "Dad, I need to ride home." And this would be on a Saturday night when he would have to be up early for church the next morning. So he would drive out and pick me up that late. So
That's awesome. Yeah. At least he knew he could get you to the church on time by picking you up.
yeah.
Well, Timothy, what made you gravitate then toward the bass, and who were some of your personal musical influences, whether individual musicians or bands?
Yeah, well, like I said, I played piano first, and I took piano lessons as a kid. And I also played clarinet, starting off in 2nd grade. So, but piano was my thing. I wanted to be like Elton John. He was the songs, the music back then, in the early 70s was just, I wanted to play piano. I wanted to sing, and I wanted to be in that kind of group. But I was listening to his rhythm section. I didn't realize it. I was always banging out the left hand on the keyboard and listening to the bass parts. And his bass player was the one who I think had the biggest influence on me, and that was Dee Murray, the early Elton John days. And when as you grow up and you're trying to find your way, I had friends. Okay, so in the early 70s, mid 70s, everybody had the CB craze going on, and so we all had CBs, and that was like a big thing for me. And I had a couple friends on the CB whose brothers were in bands, garage bands, and so we'd go over and listen to them play, and I just seemed to gravitate to one of the guys' brothers was a bass player, and I thought, well, this is kind of cool. Maybe hear the bass and I like what he's playing. I like the sound, I like the feel of it. And so I took the guitar that I was playing guitar at the time too. I took the two top strings off, the high E and the B string on my classical guitar, and I made my first bass. And that's at 13, that was my first bass up till my 14th birthday. So that was it. My parents wanted to see what I was doing musically before they invested any money into getting me a bass. But I just really was practicing bass parts on the classical guitar at first. And then for my 14th birthday, my mom got me my first bass. So, and then the rest is history.
Very cool. You mentioned Elton John. We had a conversation not too long ago with a good friend of yours, I believe, Kenny Metcalf.
Yeah.
And, with Elton, the early years. And, I asked Kenny, Rex and I did, we were like, Kenny, we know that Timothy is a fan of Elton John's music. And have you ever thought about getting him to play bass with you? And, kind of the Stryper and the Elton John connection. He said, oh, yeah, he has.
Yeah. Yeah, I played with him a number of times. Played shows up in Oregon and California. I think, we played in Texas. So whenever their bass player can't make it, he usually calls me up, and I know all the songs anyway. So yeah. I get a wig and the glasses, and I got my 70s outfit.
That's right.
Disco outfit, and I got the shoes, the platform. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Do it. It's fun.
Now, Timothy, I have heard just the names throughout your lore, in going back to early Stryper when you guys first hit the scene. But among your first bands were White Lace and Afton Kid. Mm-hmm. And all that we've ever really heard, or me, I can't really speak for Rex and Mike, but I just heard of the names, and I'm just curious, if you don't mind, just fill us in on those bands. What genres did they consist of? Were you playing the bass in those bands? And I ask because, as you mentioned, you can also play a variety of instruments, especially piano and keyboard.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Afton Kid came first, and that was my first original band that I was in. And we played some covers too, but the guys in that band were probably a good 7 years, 7 years older than I am, maybe 10 years. But I was just a young kid. I was 15 years old, and which was a great experience to play with older people. And they introduced me to the Hollywood scene, and we played the Hollywood circuit with those guys and played backyard parties. And it was a original band. The music was probably whatever was going on in the late 70s. Tom Petty. We played, I'm thinking cover-wise, Rolling Stones covers. We played David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust, stuff like that. And then we had original songs too. And we kind of mixed everything up. And so the drummer of that band plays a big role later on with my, I don't want to say salvation, but my return to Christ. So I'll get into that in a second. But after that band, I ended up in a band called White Lace, which was just a cover band. And same thing again, we played backyard parties, and we played a place called Gazzari's in Hollywood a few times. And being in that band led to me joining Stormer, which we'll get into probably in a little bit. Stormer hired White Lace to play one of their own personal parties. So they would have these big parties, and then they'd have bands play at their own parties. So they hired us to play, and that's where they saw me. So it was kind of, everything was like a stepping stone. Afton Kid was the first time I'd ever gone in the studio and recorded. And so I'm young, 15, 16, 17 years old. White Lace, I was, 17, 18, and I joined Stormer right in high school, my last year of high school, and that was in '81. And so I was in that band for a couple of years too.
So basically, if I'm understanding correctly, Timothy, Stormer, because I knew they were a popular Sunset Strip band, they came in contact with you because your band played at a party for them. And so then they noted you, and then they came a calling one day, right? Is that, how did that transpire?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, I used to go see Stormer back in the day, and they were a huge band. I mean, this was Van Halen days, and Quiet Riot, and so all these bands were big in LA before they actually made it. Stormer was one of them. There was a band called Smile. There was a band called A La Carte. There were a lot of these bands were just huge, and then they formed into other bands, and we get Rat and Great White and Quiet Riot, of course, in the early '80s. It was one of the first bands other than Van Halen to take off. Stormer never after I joined the band, I think it was on its second or third inception as far as guitar players go, and their original guitar player had moved on, and the guitar player in the band when I joined was Donnie Simmons, who's an excellent guitar player, songwriter, good friend. So we did the circuit just like they had always done, but things just weren't, at that time, weren't happening, and other bands were getting signed. Motley Crue took off and got really huge, and it seemed like bands were going more towards that glam kind of look. Poison moved into town, and they had their look, and Motley, had their look, and with Stormer, we're more of a rock band, just the normal looking rock band. We didn't have that glam kind of thing that was starting to take off at the time.
So and then with Stormer, Timothy, because I'm 50 years old, and when I first encountered you with Stryper was in '84, and at that time, oh goodness, I was probably around 14 or something. But I knew through lore, through the bands, I knew Stormer was a popular band during that time, and without trying to get too personal, Timothy, but with them being such a big band, as the story and the lore goes, as I understand it, you had left Stormer, and I was just curious if I may ask, and you can always hit that pass button, what made you leave Stormer? Because they were popular. I mean, they were happening.
So along with all that came the excess of Hollywood, and there was, the drugs and drinking and women and all that stuff. And I lived that lifestyle. I was involved with it, and I was feeling I wasn't right. I gave my life to Christ when I was 9 years old. It was 1972, and I wasn't living right. And I just felt that conviction. It just kept stirring up inside. And I had okay, so Afton Kid, the drummer for Afton Kid, we used to do drugs together, cocaine. It was like a big thing. And it got to the point where he was supplying me. He was, we were just going out and partying all the time. And we'd have these nights where I wouldn't even remember what direction I was driving. It was crazy. And the guy was miserable. He was going through a divorce. He was angry. It wasn't a good thing. And it got to the point where I didn't want to be around him. I owed him money for drugs, and it wasn't a good thing. He came to Christ. And this was in late '82. And right around the same time, I was just like feeling, I need to change my life. I need to get out of this lifestyle. He came to Christ, and he came to my door one night, and he had this smile and a glow about him that only somebody who knows the Lord would understand. Usually when he was laughing or smiling, it was something dirty, you know. And I just started, you know, seeing this change in this guy's life. His name's Michael Guido. He ended up inviting me to his church that he was going to, which was Calvary Chapel. And Raul Reese was the pastor, still is. And I just started getting involved. I left Stormer. I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't live that way anymore. And there was a good period of, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 months that I didn't play music. I just was involved with the church and just trying to get my life right. And so that's pretty much why I left Stormer. So came to the Lord, rededicated my life to the Lord.
Just kind of quick here while we're on this period of your life. Now this was pre-Stryper, obviously. Had you, having grown up as a preacher's kid, having been around the church and all that, had you had an awareness or much exposure to Christian rock prior to your involvement with Stryper?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, there wasn't, we had the Jesus People's 70s rock. There wasn't really too much out there. But I mean, there was like, you know, Second Chapter of Acts, Keith Green, Larry Norman, Randy Stonehill, those guys, you know, and those were my sister's influences on me. So I went to those concerts. I experienced all that stuff as a kid. So yeah, I had it, and I had it around me. And of course, later on, Michael W. Smith and Amy Grant and stuff like that. But the music didn't appeal to me. It does now, but back then I was like, you know, I wanted to.
Had you heard anything rockier like Res Band or Petra or anything like that?
Later on
Yeah.
Petra,
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. But yeah, in the early days, no, I didn't know too much. But I mean, I had my sister's friends were all, you know, ex-hippies, and everybody had guitars, and you know, it was all that kind of stuff. So I had that influence around me, and they were Christians, obviously. So I had the people around me. It just didn't appeal. The music didn't appeal to me at the time.
Timothy, did I understand you correctly? Just to make sure I heard correctly, did you say, was Michael Guido the drummer for Afton Kid?
Yeah.
I did not. I never realized that. And
you know Michael?
No, sir. I don't know him personally, but just know who he is through Stryper, and also right. through Megadeth. He was on the road with Dave Mustaine as their road pastor for a while, and I believe DC Talk for a while. So yeah. I definitely know who he is, and just through you guys and the bands that I've mentioned, and I know he's done really great things for the Lord. You know, he's sold out to God.
He started PR Ministries, Preaching Resurrection Ministries, and he's a road pastor. He goes out with bands, and he got to start with us. I mean, that's where he got his inspiration back in the early Stryper days.
That is awesome. I never knew that, but that's pretty cool. Thank you for sharing that. Well, then, so you had left Stormer. You had were basically giving your heart back to Christ, as it were, and then you got a phone call, as I understand the legend correctly, as the story goes. Some guys were in a band called Rock's Regime / Stryper. There was a phone call at your house, and they were seeking you out. They had seen you in Stormer. They were looking for you. And did your mom answer the phone? Is that the way that it went?
I think it did. I was actually at a church meeting that day. Yeah, of all things. And when I got home, there was a note, and I think it said something to the effect, Robert Sweet. I think she mentioned the band, and it was a Christian band, which they weren't at the time. But I think they were at that same transition. They were looking to turn everything over to the Lord. But yeah, she mentioned the town that they were from, which was La Mirada, and that's where the band kind of got a start. And that actual day, I was in La Mirada, and it was quite a distance from where I lived. But I remember for some reason driving through the town and seeing the sign, and it stuck in my head. So when I got home that night and saw on the note that they were from La Mirada, I don't know, just one of those things.
Yeah.
And it also happened that morning at this meeting that I was attending. We had been praying. I had been praying for God to use me with music somehow. And then that very night, I get home from the meeting, and there's this note, the Christian band looking for a bass player in La Mirada, which stuck in my head for some reason. But so yeah, and a funny thing is also, this was probably, so that happened in August of '83. Somewhere around February of '83, they had tried to contact me one other time, and that was at a club at the Troubadour in Hollywood. I was seeing a band playing there. I think it was my brother's band, but Oz had come up, and at this point, Stormer was still kind of a big thing, and so everybody's hitting me up to join their band after I left Stormer, and I didn't want to join another band. So Oz had come up to me and handed me a piece of paper with their number on it, and he said, "Looking for a bass player," and I'm like, whatever, it's just another one. So, but yeah, I still remember that he had come up to me that one night and asked me if I was interested in being in their band, and I wasn't at the time. Show me.
So with any trepidation that you might have had, Timothy, regarding, were they Rock's Regime at the time still, whenever you joined up? Okay, so what broke the trepidation? Was it after you met the guys and the Lord's hand was?
I would say probably around the same time that I was getting this conviction in late '82. They probably, I think, had given their lives, rededicated their lives to Christ. I don't know how serious they were at the time, and even how serious I was. It just seemed like when I came down and I heard they played me a demo, and I think it was the song From Wrong to Right. And on hearing that song, I heard, Jesus is the way, and I'm like, and the double guitar leads, and I'm like, yeah, I'm joining. This is where God's led me. I just knew it. We prayed that night, but I don't think that any of us were really even aware of what was happening. It's just like we came together. I was the last piece to fit that puzzle. And I don't think we even knew.
You prayed for the Lord to use
for the Lord, yeah. But I mean, things just happened, right? Just started happening. We went in and started recording right away, and I brought in my friend Guido, who had introduced me to Calvary Chapel, and Chuck Smith and all that, and I brought him down, and he was like, yeah, this is everything just happened. We started, I think we're going to get into it, but we started having Bible studies on Thursday nights. We'd have band practice every night, but on Thursday nights we'd have a Bible study, and we just started inviting kids into the study, just neighborhood kids, and then they'd start bringing their friends. And the next thing you know, it's like this little garage that we would practice in was filled. I've got pictures somewhere. I wish I could find them. There's pictures of us, like, just I'm trying to play, and there's kids like all around in this garage, and then they're like going out through the door, and we had a little side door, and there's people going out onto the lawn and into the driveway outside of this garage just to hear the music. And we practice and have this little Bible study on Thursday nights, and kids would come, and people started giving their lives to Christ. This was before we were even playing out. Our first show was February of '83, or no, I'm sorry, February of '84, and the place was packed with all of our kids, Bible study kids.
That's awesome.
And when we got done, the place emptied out, and the band that was headlining played after us to an empty room. So it was stuff like that. That was like, things like that were happening, and it was like this audience for us was pre-built before we even started playing in Hollywood, and it just grew from there too.
So who would lead these studies on Thursday nights, Tim? Was that something Michael was doing even back then?
Michael Guido. So he became, and that's where he found his calling to be the road pastor in a sense. And he'd come in and read something, and we'd do a little study on the Bible, and he'd ask if anybody wants to accept Christ and Jesus as their Savior, and kids would start giving their lives to Christ. It was really amazing to see.
How many people do you think were coming to this? It sounds like was it like in the hundreds on Thursday nights?
I don't think it was, not hundreds, but I would say towards the end when we started playing out in the clubs and stuff, it probably got close to 100 people. Okay. That's a lot of people to show up in a driveway or a front yard, at a residential home. But yeah, after that we started taking it out into the clubs, and from there it grew.
We have just spoken with somebody a couple hours ago, Timothy, who said that they had given their heart to Christ at a Stryper concert. And you might remember your friend Dale Erickson.
Dale,
Rex and I had the pleasure to speak with Dale, and he gave his heart to Christ after hearing The Rock That Makes Me Roll that you guys recorded. Yeah. And then I believe here on our Vodcast, we've had an episode with your friend Rick Hart from Guardian, the original Guardian. And I believe that Rick if I'm not mistaken, had given his heart to Christ at a Stryper show. So it's amazing because you prayed, you know, Lord, please use me, and boy, did he ever.
He did. Collectively, I think the Holy Spirit worked collectively. I don't know individually, but I mean, collectively as a band, you know, the Holy Spirit showed up as whatever we were doing, you know, right or wrong. We were knuckleheads, you know, kids, you know, doing stupid things, and the Holy Spirit would still show up in spite of us. And, you know, I give all the credit to God through the Holy Spirit working through that band that did everything. There wasn't anything that I did other than saying yes.
When I was younger, Timothy, I mean, looking at you guys, and I'm not trying to put the cart ahead of the horse here in the conversation, but, you know, I just thought you guys were, I'm not saying you guys were old. What I'm saying is I just thought you guys were, you know, older and all that. And so I'm looking, thinking you guys are all wise and all that. And I'm a 50-year-old man now, and I'm looking back and considering the age you guys were during different time frames. And I'm like, you guys were so young. Yeah. And I can see the pressure you all had on you because as Stryper, I mean, you guys were the, I don't mean to misspeak, but the premier Christian metal band. And there was a lot of what you were.
Michael was 19, I was 20, 21 Oz, and 22 Robert. And I mean, we were kids.
Yeah.
I look at kids that age now, I'm like, how the heck how did I do it? I mean, it was God, because I'm looking at, you know, there's kids that are probably more mature today than they were back when we were that age. But, you know, it was definitely the Lord, because I didn't have wisdom. I didn't have anything. I had faith, and that was all. That's all I had. I still struggled and had issues, and I wasn't in a position of leader. I was in a position of leadership, but I don't say that in the sense that I realized it. I didn't know that kids were looking up to me like that. And so one day you just all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is something that God's doing. And
so during the Yellow and Black
right,
Attack and Soldiers albums, you were saying all of a sudden you just looked and saw what God was doing. Did it seem like a slow climb, or was it more like a whirlwind when Stryper was taking off?
It just kind of, okay, so with the Yellow and Black Attack, when that came out, I mean, everything just kind of came together. People got interested in the band right from the beginning. It's like, what are these guys doing? You know, because everybody was, at that point, Motley Crue was big. So it's like everything was the devil, and you know, that was like the big thing. You know, it's like, here we are to counteract that in a sense. We were throwing Bibles out. You know, we didn't do that in the beginning, but that's just something that just kind of evolved, and things evolved. The name change from Rock Regime to Stryper evolved early on, and the acronym Salvation Through Redemption, Unity, Peace, Encouragement, and Righteousness. That came. Isaiah 53:5 was not there in the beginning. So all this stuff kind of happened early on, along with the name change, and then recording, being signed to Enigma Records and going in and recording. I mean, I think we had $5,000 or $6,000 to record that album, which isn't a lot of money back in those days for record budgets to go into a studio at $1,500 a day. You know, so it's like you start, things add up. But we went in and recorded, and it was a new experience for me, and learning and just growing, and that first album came out, and it was some of the first touring that we did, you know, in vans. And I think the first time we actually went out of LA, we went in a van and a limousine. We had an old limousine from the 70s that was blew heat in through the back seat. The heater was on and you couldn't shut it off, and it was kind of a miserable experience. So the stuff that we used in LA, you know, for the gimmicks, you know, there's a band who has their own limo, you know, and had a yellow stripe painted down the side. Well, we took that up to Northern California to do some touring, and it wasn't something that you'd want to tour in or travel in. So, but that first tour, you know, we went around the Midwest. We went to Texas, and we played up north, and we did a lot of those first shows, setting the groundwork for what was to come later with the Soldiers album. And then of course Soldiers, by the time we started on that album, we were brought to Japan for the first time. That was in '85. The album wasn't even finished. I don't even think Michael had finished recording the voice and or even writing lyrics. I think if you look at the Live in Japan DVD video, it's not a DVD, some of the songs, the lyrics are different than what's on the album. So the songs weren't even completed yet. And, but it took off from there.
Yes, it did.
If I can just say, so the Soldiers album is kind of a pivotal moment in my life, because it was actually the first Christian rock album I ever bought. Mm-hmm. It wasn't my first exposure to Christian rock. That came earlier, but I had bought, you know, I had lots of various classic rock vinyl and such back in the day, and but I had never actually laid down money to buy any kind of Christian rock or metal album until I saw Soldiers in a record store one day. And I looked at that thing, and, you know, and saw the song titles and Isaiah 53:5 and all that. And I went, okay, I got to try this. I'd never even heard of you guys at that point.
So I just went on looks.
I just went on looks.
Yeah.
So it ended up being the first, you know, Christian rock or metal album that I ever actually bought for myself. So
yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
And that goes to show you, I mean, there was a lot of albums that I bought back in the day. I bought just because the cover looked cool.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. All right. So, yes, I mean, you guys took the world by storm. I mean, Against the Law. Now, Timothy, you had kind of touched on some of this, but I just want to say that's one of my favorite Stryper albums. I mean, the music on that release smokes. And I understand you kind of alluded earlier, you said, you know, there were times in your life, as we all have, we've all been knuckleheads at certain times. And the older I get, the more I understand.
Yeah.
It's called life. And, you know, the Good Shepherd leads us through and out of that stuff. And for some of the flack that album has taken, though, because that was kind of Stryper's secular album and all that, but, you know, underneath it all, there are still good values and stuff. I mean, it's not like a bad album. There's nothing bad or nasty on it, really. It's good value stuff, if that makes any sense, what I'm trying to say. And that album simply smokes. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about the Against the Law album.
Yeah, I mean, out of all the albums, even the later ones, I still think that's probably my favorite out of the bunch. It was a time, I don't know, I can't really explain from all the negativity that we experienced on the road, from getting bombarded by everybody. I'm talking about the Christian community that would picket the shows, and it was a different time. We were just burned out. We wanted to, we were, it was at a point where we were like self-policing each other. It was kind of a miserable experience to be in Stryper during, you know, to hell with the devil for that instance. Our biggest, you know, most successful album was, you know, a time of, well, we really got to walk the straight and narrow now because everybody's watching. And it was just like, we can't live life. We can't be ourselves. You can't, anybody else could go out and, you know, be themselves. You know, we go to a convenience store and get, you know, bombarded by questions, you know, what are you doing here? You know, buy cigarettes and alcohol there, you know, that kind of stuff. So you get over and over, you get people. I remember one night, the promoter, a great Christian promoter, brought us in, and there were two church groups out in the parking lot with bullhorns and signs picketing the show, and one sign had Motley Crue and the other one had us, what's the difference? And brought these people in afterwards to like meet with everybody, and there was fighting amongst these pastors, you know, arguing, and it was like pointing fingers. And for me personally, I just got to the point where I'm like just done with all of this. I want to just check out. And so I think we were all kind of feeling that pressure during Against the Law was, and also the music scene was changing. Everybody was getting, you know, Guns N' Roses, and just the harder, edgy bands were coming out. And that whole glam thing was kind of getting pushed aside. There was just a change internally within the band. We finally, rather than self-policing each other, we finally came together as a band and were like friends and wanted to hang out together. And that's how that album actually came about. We get together and just put some songs together, go play some pool, or, you know, go hang out, go to eat, do something other than just, you know, church and, you know, ministry and all this stuff. And there wasn't any formulas to the music. We wrote it together as a band, you know, whoever came in with an idea, Michael or Oz, or I had ideas or whatever, everything was put together and arranged by the band as opposed to one or two people or a producer or whatever. And so when we went in and started recording, everything was just, it was a different feeling. It was an enjoyable experience. And you hear that on the album. I mean, everybody played, and you know, as opposed to having, you know, studio guy come in and fill in or whatever, it was like everybody had their input on it. And I don't think there was as much of a time constraint, you know, as before. It's like you had to have the thing done, you know, you get 1 day to do bass tracks and, you know, 10 days for drums. And, you know, it's like you weren't under as much pressure to get stuff finished. And so it shows the solos, Oz's guitar solos, Michael's vocals, you know, the drum sound, everything was just, everything was there. It sounds like a band versus having somebody go in and overproduce something. It was just raw and in your face, and it was good music. And so, I don't know, does that answer the question?
Yes, sir.
What we were talking about.
well, and Tim, and I feel out of the first 5 studio albums, production-wise, that you guys hit the mark with Against the Law. You play that today, you know, it's what, almost, it's 40 years old or 30 years old now. I mean, it still stands up great. It does not sound dated at all.
Yeah. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
a good one.
Would you say, Tim, that that album maybe was more in line than with the first couple albums before the production got so much heavier on To Hell with the Devil and In God We Trust?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah,
And like I said, it was a band effort.
yeah.
Well, Tim, my beloved Stryper, you guys, after roughly, 91, after Can't Stop the Rock, you guys disappeared on me, and Mike and Rex.
Yeah.
But I was surprised in 1994. I was surprised to see you had teamed up with Rex Carroll and Jimmy Bennett and your buddy Robert Sweet from Stryper, and y'all recorded the King James album. How did that team up come about, and what were your thoughts pertaining to the release?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how it came about. I know Rex Carroll, he had contacted me, and Robert also. He wanted the Stryper rhythm section for this project that he was doing. Excuse me. And so that's kind of how it came about. It's kind of foggy. I don't remember all that was going on at the time, because I was in another band also called No Stranger. And we had been recording a bunch and playing the scene. This was like in 92, 93. So when Rex called, I can't remember if we went out, if he gave me demos first of all, and then we went out and recorded, or if we went out to his house. I think we went to his house, if I remember right, and learned the songs, Robert and myself, and then Jimmy Bennett, who's a great guy, vocalist. We learned the songs, and then Des Dickerson was the producer on that album. And he would, of course, Des, if people don't know, was with Prince. He was the guitar player for Prince. And so he produced it, and this was up in, I believe, Wheaton, Illinois. So we did the album, and turned out great. We shot a video for it in Nashville for Hard Road to Go. And I didn't really know what to expect with anything. And also at this time, you gotta understand, Stryper had been disbanded, I guess unofficially, since Michael left in 92. So I've been doing other things, and the music scene as it is at that time was very unstable. So I got out and got a job, a regular job. I was working. I had some stability finally in my life. And so Rex had hit us up, hit me up if we wanted to do this tour. He had started booking a tour, or had something going on, and I declined. He asked if I was available, and I said, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I just started this job. I've been making some decent money. I can't go on the road right now. So, and that's why I declined. And then, I think they continued on, maybe did a few shows, but that was my extent of it, other than the video and doing the album.
Yeah. And, 1994 you hit the nail on the head. Of course, you would know firsthand, being a musician, but, when the grunge had hit, I remember 94, it was kind of a weird time. The bands that we loved, such as you guys and King James, as great as King James was and all that, that wasn't the in vogue music at the time, and
yeah, it was kind of guitar oriented, 80s
right.
rock, 80s metal.
Now, Tim, you you performed bass with Tourniquet on Spelunker. That was their 1997 release, Crawl to China. And you also were performing live with them at the Flavo Festival, I believe 2008. And just out of curiosity, because I am a fan of the band Tourniquet, how did that collaboration come about for each of those?
And this will go back to Sin Dizzy, which is a band that Oz and I put together. Sin Dizzy had been playing some shows, and I think Tourniquet was on the bill for one of them. And what else? Oh, it would have been my ex-wife, Irene, and I had been playing together. She's a singer, songwriter, and I had been playing fretless bass at the time, backing her up. And we did a show where I was playing fretless, and I think Tourniquet was there. Ted or Luke, somebody, I don't remember who, but they wanted me to play. They thought the fretless bass would be great on this one song. And he explained it to me. It was going to be like a big band, like a Sinatra kind of thing, you know. And I said, sure, you know, I can play swing bass. It's great. So they brought me in to record that. And then, of course, the song starts off with fretless bass and Luke singing. And then it goes into their, you know, the hard version of the song. So that's kind of how it came about. And we'd been friends, and, you know, I'm still good friends with Luke, and we talk and every once in a while, and, you know, hang out, meet up on Facebook and stuff like that. The shows, let's see, Ted asked me to do this festival, Flavo Festival, and they picked the songs. I did not do a good job on that, so that needs to be thrown out there right away. We didn't have one rehearsal. It was just like, here's a list of songs flying out. We were supposed to do a rehearsal before the show, the day before the show. Well, flights got delayed, and I think, if I remember right, we flew out there and just had to go on stage. And I'm like, wow, this is like, I don't even know what I'm playing. But so anyways, it shows it's like, there's me without knowing any songs and no rehearsal or anything. So that was kind of a hard one for me. We did some other shows in Europe later that I wish we could find the videos for those, because we did one up in Norway, and I think there was another one. Those shows came off great. Of course, they're not videoed. So
yeah.
But yeah, those were that was a situation as far as me playing with them, and
Very
mainly
cool.
just the fretless. Yeah.
So, Sin Dizzy, I remember, I think, wasn't that 98, Tim, that the release for Sin Dizzy came out? And
Yeah.
I remember it being a surprise for me. And how long had y'all been working on that before it saw the light of day?
And so, yeah, that actually, there was a project that Oz had, there's, I think, 4 songs on that album that are from Oz's original demo tape that he was trying to do a project of his own writing. One of the songs was actually going to be part of the next Stryper album if we would have continued on. It was a song called Hebrew Kings. I mean, Stryper, we actually played it, you know, at rehearsals and sound checks, and so that song would have been a representation of what would have been the next Stryper if we continued on at that time. So this is going back into 92, 93. Oz did the demo. We did the demo together in 93 of the first original songs. And then a few years went by and he wanted to just put an afternoon jam band together on weekends. He had a friend, the drummer, John Bocanegra, who Oz knew just from work. And he was a great drummer. He was a young kid. I think he was probably 18 at the time when we were in our 30s. Excellent drummer. And we just started getting together on Saturdays and writing some more songs and just whatever, you know, we'd jam on something and turn it into a song. And so that's how the whole thing came about. And then we recorded, I think 6 more songs with that one and put the demo together of the original songs that Oz and I did with a drum machine. And then the newer songs with John and Bobby McNeil on guitar, and put this thing together. I didn't know what to expect. I kind of put it all together and arranged I had a friend do the artwork, and I arranged the financing to get the CDs printed up and mastered and all that. And I put it out just back in 98, we didn't have much of the internet, if you remember.
Right.
So it was a lot of bulletin board services, and there was what was it called? Stryper something zone, where a lot of Stryper fans hung out. And I just typed in, you know, hey, you know, we're trying to raise money to put this CD together, and people started pre-ordering the CD before it was even out. And I put some ads out in Heaven's Metal magazine and just stuff like that, trying to create a buzz about it. Right. I went to Nashville and tried to present the demos to some of the record companies, and you know, didn't get any bites. You know, they weren't interested in that kind of stuff. But it did so well on 's own. I mean, I can't remember how many at the time. I think we sold like 5,000 copies on our own, which isn't a lot, but for an independent band just taking orders over the internet, I think it was pretty successful.
Sure.
And then you also remember at that time Napster was becoming the big thing, and it's like all of a sudden the sales started dropping off, and they had uploaded the album, the tracks to Napster, so everybody was sharing them. And
I know
so that kind of killed that whole thing off.
Yeah, I understand that. And as you mentioned, that's why it was kind of a surprise for me, because at that time, the computer, what am I trying to say? The online stuff, it was kind of a no man's land during the late 90s too. It wasn't what it is today, the social media. But so, Timothy, we get to, that was the latter 90s, and then we get to the Stryper Expos and the Cornerstone 2001 concert. And I'm just curious, what were your thoughts about the scores of people who were hungry for you guys? They were hungry at that time for more Stryper.
Yeah.
And what that translates is that the lasting impression you all had made. So was any part of those experiences, the Expos or Cornerstone, was any of that surprising to you?
Yeah, I think so. If you went back maybe a year or two before Cornerstone and the Expos for that matter, Michael Sweet and Sin Dizzy played a concert in Puerto Rico. And they brought us both in. Michael did his solo stuff and Sin Dizzy did our stuff. And then at the very end, Michael came up with Sin Dizzy and we played Stryper songs. So and I guess they may have billed it as a Stryper reunion in a sense, but it was the first time we'd been on stage minus Robert. And probably since 92, 93 actually, as a 3-piece. But with Michael since 92, and the place was packed. It was like 10,000 people. It was huge, and it was like we'd been struggling to fill, 50 people at the Whiskey A Go-Go in Hollywood, and all of a sudden we got 10,000 people. So I started getting the wheels turning again. And we had a friend of ours named Rich Serpa who started the Stryper expos. He did the first one in New Jersey, and that brought in a lot of people. And he was, in his mind, he was trying to emulate what the KISS expos do, where they just every year they have the fans come in. And so I can't remember, did we play? I think we did play. That was the first time we played together as Stryper, was at the New Jersey Expo. And of course, Sin Dizzy played, and I did one with we did a show with my ex-wife, Irene, and so everybody's like showcasing their individual projects. And then Stryper came at the very end and played. So we did that one on the East Coast in New Jersey, and then we did another one in California. And just the people, the one in California, I remember it was just huge. We did that inside a big arena, and I can't remember how many people were there, but it was a big thing. It was a big deal. And then, of course, Cornerstone. That I don't remember much of Cornerstone other than I remember the drive out there because I drove from California to Illinois. And I remember getting there. I remember doing the interviews, but I don't remember the actual concert. I don't remember being on stage. But anyways, there's so much that has happened since then.
Yeah, well, you can see all that online, and yeah, I mean, there's a massive crowd around you guys, rooting you on, supporting you guys.
Yeah.
You guys, nailed it and everything. And in 2007, you had toured with renowned recording artist Richard Marx. And how did you meet up with Richard, Timothy, and get involved with that tour?
Yeah, I was one of the many guys who had the opportunity to play with him, and his music director, keyboard player, Steve Hornby, was at this point I had moved to Nashville, and I was doing shows in Nashville, just doing the club scene and just doing my thing, trying to do stuff, in the songwriting circles. So they'd have this get together once a week up in Nashville for songwriters to get together and just showcase. And so I was playing there with my ex-wife, and Steve was playing. And we just kind of hooked up and did a few shows like that together. He, I guess Richard had needed a bass player, and they hit me up, and I said, sure, yeah. And so I did a few shows. It was for a couple of months, and did some shows in the West Coast, Vegas, and did some California shows, played in Trinidad, and somewhere else in the Caribbean. But that was it. I wasn't just playing shows, and it was good stuff. He's a good guy.
I wondered what you were up to, because Timothy, I saw you, I'd seen you on the Soldiers and the To Hell tours in Little Rock, Arkansas. And a buddy and myself, we drove to Sauget, Illinois, right on the cusp of East St. Louis, and we saw you on the 7 tour back in 2003.
Yep.
And that was a pleasure. And I just want to say very briefly that I have a photo that you agreed to take with me. You stepped off the tour bus, and my buddy snapped a picture of you and I, and then I in turn snapped a picture of you and him. And I just want to say personally thank you, because not only was it just a nice gesture, but my friend, he passed away in 2016, and he and I were in a little local band together, and Stryper, you guys were an influence on us and ministered to us. And I know it was his first time to see you guys. And so there's always more than meets the eye, they say. And in that picture that I have of you and I, he's the one who took it. I just want to say thank you for being so kind to us, because he's now with the Lord, but it meant the world to him that we got to meet you for a brief moment. But you disappeared on us after the 7 tour. It's like, man, we got to see Stryper, and all the guys. And then when Reborn came out, it's like, where's Timothy? And did you just decide to, I'm not trying to get nosy, but were you just not up for touring regularly at that point?
Show it.
We did that tour, the 7 tour, and we did the last show, which is the Puerto Rico, they did the Puerto Rico DVD. And then it was just, I don't know, it was just kind of tough. It wasn't like it was back in the heyday. I'll put it that way. It wasn't fun. I was older. It was a great back in the day when you're a kid and you're traveling 12 people in a van or whatever, and everybody crashes in one hotel room. But when you're in your late 40s or early 50s, things just kind of, it's not fun.
Yeah.
I don't want to share a bed with another guy. It's not, I don't want all the crew guys laying on the floor and, somebody sleeping on a couch. And it's just like, it was hard to start over. We were starting over again, starting from scratch. It wasn't that bad all the time, but it just, there were some politics within the band also going on. And I just felt that it was like, we had our heyday back in the 80s. And for me, it's just not going to be, I'm playing with other people. I'm kind of doing my own thing now. And it's probably just best that I move on. And that's what I did. And they continued on. They got Tracy in the band, Tracy Ferry, and I kind of honestly lost track. I didn't really know what they were doing for the next 5 years. So they continued on without me, and I did my thing. And
well, I had seen you again in 2009. You had, by that time, and we need to talk about your solo project, Breakfast at Timothy's. And I had also seen you, again, to my surprise, it's like, hey, here's Timothy again. Because I did see the Reborn tour in 05 with Tracy, and I was pleasantly surprised. I saw you again in Little Rock, Arkansas at the Rev Room on the Murder by Pride tour.
Mhm.
So it was good to see you back, Timothy. But let's talk about your album during that same year. You had time to record Breakfast at Timothy's, released in 09. Timothy, how did you approach the recording process for this album? Which tracks did you begin with to build upon for each song?
Yeah, so at the time I had been working, let's see, that was in 2008. I had my best friend, his name's Chris Eddy. We have worked together. He's a producer, songwriter, singer in Nashville, and we just hung out a lot. We did a lot of recording, and I play on his stuff. He plays on my stuff. So we're good friends. But I had mentioned to him one day that, well, man, I'm just overwhelmed with work. At the time, I was working at Sony Music, and I told him, I go, man, I wish I could just do something musically, you know, as a bass solo project. I think it would be great to just do something, put a band together, and just go play. And he called me up like a week later, and he starts, hey, listen to this, and he starts sending me songs that he's writing. And I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. And it's like he's playing these parts, you know, what do you think of this and that? And I'm going, oh, that sounds great. And before I know it, he's like got this whole album written for me. And so I go, well, let's record it and just have fun with it. And so that's how it started. He wrote the songs. I'm working. He's writing and putting down tracks, and I started coming over and laying down bass parts. I remember we recorded drums in his garage, and all those drums you hear on there are crummy drum set, recorded with crappy mics, and some of them were taped to stands and stuff. And I pressed the button for all the drums. It's like, okay, I'm hitting the record button, and he laid down the drum tracks to a click track and a scratch guitar. And then I came back and recorded bass, the rhythm bass tracks, and then I went back again and I recorded all the solo bass tracks. And then he produced the whole thing. He wrote it, produced it, and we put my name on it. And the whole idea was that we were going to tour together, just, well, not like tour like big tour, but you know, right, doing like the jazz scene or the small clubs, coffee houses, whatever. I was just going to book some gigs, and we were going to play together, get a drummer, and he's a guitar player also. So anyways, put the band together, and that was what I had planned to do in 2009.
Well, I'm surprised that you told me that, you know, it sounds very crisp and clear, and it sounds great, and it encompasses a wide body of styles, and you know, it's very neat. So friends, if you haven't heard Breakfast at Timothy's, I mean, it's a quality recording. I know what Timothy said about some of the, you know, the mics and stuff, and it sounds great. So
yeah, no, well, that's the whole thing. It's like what you can do. I mean, this room I'm in here is like a 10 by 10 room, but I record here. I do video conferencing here. This is like, you can do everything that you would do in a big studio inside the box, you know, inside your laptop or computer. I had, and that's my point. We no budget for the thing. We just did it, you know, in a garage and just had fun with it. We had our good friend David Safira, who's with Bloodgood, original guitar player for Bloodgood. He mixed the album. So, and he had just, you know, done a bunch of stuff with like Little Big Town, and so he just came off of that, you know, the Boondock song, and then he comes and mixes my album, and but so he mixed it, and that's, I think, you know, he gave it that sound. He was a great mix engineer. So this kind of leads up to me rejoining Stryper, and so at that time that I was recording, I have one song on the album entitled Sweet Lullaby. And I tracked that the day that we got word that Michael Sweet's wife, Kyle, had passed away. And so I dedicated that song to her memory. And it was during this time of her passing, I went to the funeral, and that kind of re-sparked friendship between me and Michael. And he had asked me to rejoin the band they were going to do the 25th anniversary tour with, the original plan was to have Tracy play bass on the new songs, and then I would play a set with the old songs. And as things progressed, it turned out that I ended up doing the whole thing. And I had no plans to rejoin the band. I was just going to do the one tour, and then that led into the covering and doing some other tracking, and then next thing you know, I was back in the band again.
So
As an employee this time instead of a member.
So you were, forgive me, Timothy, because I get excited sometimes when, but you said you were an employee that time instead of a member?
Yeah, talk
Yeah,
about that a little bit.
Yeah, so when I rejoined the band, originally I was a full-on member of the band, Stryper, prior to 2000 prior to 2004. And we had a corporation formed, Stryper Tour. So I was part of that. When that all dissolved after I'd left the band in 2004, 2005, 6, 7, and 8, they had done their work with Tracy. When I rejoined in 2009, I came back in, and I think they gave me the option of being a member, full member, or if I just want to be an employee. And I chose to be the employee of the band rather than get involved with all the stuff.
Sure.
So
And it's
anyway,
nice.
I rejoined the last several years that I was in the band, from 09 through 17, as an employee of Stryper rather than an actual member.
I'm glad to hear that, which it's really none of my business, but since you mentioned it, it's nice to know that the option was given to you and you were able to choose your option. You know, that's, if that makes sense. I mean, you opted to just go that route that you took. So
a lot of it, I mean, came down to really it was a matter of when I was going to get paid, because I mean, we all got paid equally, but as an employee, I get paid weekly versus have to wait till the end of the tour and,
sure.
you know, split things up that way. So it was like, yeah, I'd rather have a paycheck at the end of the week or every 2 weeks, whatever, and pay my bills and not have to worry.
Sure.
Versus, see what happens at the end. And of course, it was easier on taxes, and at least for me. And so I chose that option, and I didn't really come back into the band, as one who was going to be having any kind of influence as far as writing, or, I didn't do interviews. I showed up and did my job, and, went home at the end of the day, and that it was all good.
Well, go ahead.
Quick question here.
Yeah.
So since you were at this point now an employee rather than a full member, if we go back to like the To Hell with the Devil period and the In God We Trust period, had you actually left the band at any point in there, or were there other reasons that you didn't play on those albums?
So yeah, in To Hell with the Devil came about, I did not play on that album, and the actual reasons, Michael says something in his book that I will disagree with. I don't think his rendition or memory of the events that took place are correct. So I'll just leave it at that. But I had left, so we had come off of the Soldiers tour, and we knew that we were scheduled to go in and record start recording for a new album. But I hadn't heard from anybody since the end of the tour. So this was probably a period of 3-4 months had gone by, and it was like silence from the rest of the band since the end of the Soldiers tour. And I had just gotten married, let's see, that would have been early February of '86. And things were just, you know, I was living my life and working a regular job, and just, you know, we weren't making money, and it wasn't like this big thing yet. I mean, it was starting to take off, but it was still a struggle. And I got a call one day that the guys, I was living up near Hollywood in Burbank, California, and the guys wanted to have a meeting with me. And I kind of, you know, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, something's up, because I've had the silent treatment for several months now, and I knew something was going down. So drove all the way to Orange County, met with them, and they said that the producer didn't want me to play on the album based on my prior work. I guess he had come seeing us play somewhere, and he couldn't hear the bass on the Soldiers album, which wasn't my fault. It was mixed very low. It was kind of like the Jason Newsted thing, you know, where the bass is just, it's there, but you don't hear it. And so I, you know, being young, and that hurt my feelings, and, you know, it's like, well, screw you, I'm gonna, you know, oh yeah, well, so there was some arguing back and forth, and I said, well, then I'm out. I'm out of the band. So I quit. And they continued on and recorded. They got a guy in the band, and apparently he wasn't cut for this producer's recording either. So they brought in a studio guy to come in and track. And I had kept in touch with Oz this whole time. I had been working at Guitar Center, and hey, what's going on? You know, we kept in touch during the whole recording, and he was kind of letting me know that things weren't really working out too well as far as the other bass player. And it came time to, the album's finished, hadn't been released yet, but they were going to do some touring, doing some shows, and they had been in rehearsals, pre-production, with the new bass player, and it wasn't working out for whatever reason. You'd have to ask them why, but they had a change of heart. I think they wanted me back in the band, and they asked me if I would consider rejoining. So I went up and met with them, and we did a day of rehearsal, and we were on the road the next morning, or day after, playing. I think we played at the Night of Joy at Disney World, in Florida. And from then on, then the album was talking In God We Trust. In God We Trust was released. We redid the photo shoot, because Matt, the other bass player's picture, was in the original photo shoot. The racing suit that I'm wearing was actually made for Matt, who is a lot shorter than me, so they had to alter it and add some extra material, and so, but To Hell with the Devil photo shoot was actually a redo of the original. I know people see the original out on the internet every now and then. It's there if you want to look for it. But yeah, so that's kind of what happened. I rejoined the band and started touring, and I toured, and we did probably 9 months of touring for that album. And then it came time again to record In God We Trust, and they asked me not to play on it this time. I was all right with that one versus the first one. It didn't hurt as bad, because I was still in the band. And so, you know, a lot of people make a big deal out of it, but there's a lot of bands out there that don't use the original members on recordings. And I've learned a lot since then. I've made recording my career versus live playing, and there's a different way of playing bass in the studio versus playing live. I mean, it's just, you gotta be right on things in the studio. And so nowadays, you know, here we are 30 some years later, that's what I do, versus I wasn't doing it so well back then, and I hadn't had a lot of experience recording at that point.
Yeah, I really want to say though, you know, and we talked about this in the show prep a little bit, but I want it here on the record that, to me anyway, the albums that you did play on versus the albums that you didn't, well, in particular those two, I notice a big difference in the bass playing, the quality of it. You know, Tell the Devil and In God We Trust, to me, have very simplistic bass playing on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of understand that because I'm in a band and I'm normally the rhythm guitar player and second lead. But sometimes if our bass player can't be there, I jump in and I play the bass. And I play a pretty simple bass. So, you know, I know what that is. And so when I listen to you, like on the Soldiers album or the Yellow and Black Attack or Against the Law, you know, I hear so much more quality and diversity in the playing than I would hear on those two albums.
Thank you.
And so I just really wanted to state that because I think you brought a quality to those recordings that isn't there on Tell With the Devil and In God We Trust. So
thanks. I am more of a melodic bass player than a kind of guy who plays the root note and follows the rhythm guitars, and that's just my influences and what I grew up listening to. And so being in a guitar-oriented band where you really just need to play the bottom end of what's going on with the guitar, there's a lot of stuff going on in the low end department, and especially in Stryper, because the way that Oz and Mike set up their guitar sound anyways, they're already competing in my territory as a bass player. And then you got the drum frequency. So there's not a lot of room to do anything in that band other than play along the root notes and play along with the band. And when I first started with them, I was more of a melodic player. And it's hard to explain, but some stuff just doesn't fit. You know, I could play melodic bass with an acoustic guitar player and it would sound great. Some of the stuff I try to do with Stryper playing, that, you know, just the loud pulsating double kicks and things don't really work out as well as it would with other styles of music. So it was probably more of a stylistic thing than anything else, with just the way I played. Since then, I've learned to, you know, over the years, follow what they're doing. And every once in a while, like on the newer albums, I was able to shine a little bit. But, you know, it's being a bass player, you're not supposed to be in the spotlight anyways. Maybe that's another reason why I chose the bass. I don't like being up in the spotlight. You know, if people ask me to come up and sing or say something on the mic, I'm very nervous and very shy about it when I get on stage. But I'm happy in my element, just, you know, being the guy in the background and playing.
Well,
for me, what you did on those early albums worked. I mean, I know you can't hear the bass super well on Soldiers, but even back then I had a pretty decent stereo system. and I could hear the bass lines, and I thought they were working. So
Yeah, thanks.
that was my opinion. Anyway.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Against the law, I mean, you smoked Timothy along with the other guys. I mean, it was awesome. And I'm so glad that you all did, and I thought it was a wonderful album, Second Coming. And it was great to hear the classics with the modern production, and you were on the
Right.
bass, and that was wonderful. So I'm so glad that we have that you guys did. It was wonderful, as was the covering from 2011. I'd like to talk regarding two wonderful albums, No More Hell to Pay and Fallen.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts regarding those albums? I mean, those are remarkable. Just wanted to glean from your thoughts about.
Yeah, No More Hell to Pay, I think out of the newer albums, and probably my two favorite of the Stryper albums would be No More Hell and Against the Law. No More Hell to Pay, I mean, it was just, we went in again, and this time, you know, we're going in and recording more or less as a band. Michael being the main songwriter, he would bring in the song or the demo. We'd go to his house. He has a studio in his basement. And we would probably spend a week just learning the songs and getting the tracks down. We'd rehearse, you know, 8 hours, 10 hours a day, whatever, and learn the songs. And then we go to the studio and track drums, always track the drums first, and then track the bass parts, and then add guitars, and they would do all the overdubs. So we never went in and did it live as a band, you know, playing live, but we would go in and record a scratch guitar track and kind of a map in a sense, to let, you know, Robert know where to play and what, when a bridge would come or the solo section or whatever would be coming up in the song, you would hear that on a track with Michael speaking, and you'd hear this solo, you know, or chorus or whatever. You'd hear him speaking to let him know that's what was coming up next. And he'd lay down his drum tracks, and I'd come in, play my bass parts, and usually get 3 or 4 done a day. And so we get the bass knocked out in a couple of days, maybe 3 days. And then on that album, on No More Hell to Pay, I mean, it was just, there was a certain sound I got. I used a older, or it wasn't an older, but it was a reissue of a 50s style P bass. And it just got this tone that I didn't recapture on the Fallen album. I was kind of bummed that I didn't, but I used a different bass on the Fallen album, and it didn't track as well. But I think we got a good sound. I think the album No More Hell to Pay, I think, is a better sounding album in my opinion. But the Fallen album, same thing again. We went in and learned the songs at Michael's house, and then went in and tracked them. The studio that we would record at was up in Massachusetts, a place called Spirit House, which is on a big, large acreage out in the middle of nowhere. You hear the helicopter, sorry. Live in a bad part of town. The house, I think, was an old farmhouse or something, and they have the bands live there, and everybody has their own bedroom, central kitchen, and dining areas. And then, you know, so we'd live there for however long it would take. And it's kind of cool because you get tired, you can go take a nap and have somebody else come in and record, and go watch some TV or whatever, and come back and you're refreshed. And, good experience, the recording.
So how much time would you guys record at Spirit House? How long would that take, Tim? Like 3 weeks or longer?
Yeah, about that. I mean, we'd spend 2 or 3 days on drums, and then another 2 days, 3 days on bass, and then the guitars would be overdubbed, you know. So after they did drums and bass, Robert and I would usually fly back home, and then Oz and Mike would finish doing guitar tracks, and then background vocals would be recorded, and then Mike would take that and go home to his studio and finish the lead vocals at his house. A lot of times the words wouldn't even be written. Again, you know, he would have bits and pieces, but he'd finish it off, you know, on his own.
So, Timothy, throughout 2016 and 2019, throughout those years, you joined up with Giancarlo Floridia and the band Faithsedge, followed by playing bass with Aldo Nova. You know, I remember the video for I'm a Survivor, seeing you in that. That was 2018, 2019. How does your teaming up with Aldo Nova occur?
Although, let's see, 2018, where are we? 21? So yeah, 2018. I don't know. This last year,
Yeah.
I've been like, I don't even remember what's going on. 2018, Aldo, just through Facebook, Aldo had seen I changed my picture that day, my profile picture on Facebook, and it ended up in his news feed somehow. Like, you know how they always suggest people you might want to know, that kind of a thing.
Hey, there's Timothy.
Yeah, and so he didn't know me or know about Stryper or anything. He saw a picture of me, an older picture where I had big hair or something, and he went solely on the way the picture looked. And so he clicked in and saw, you know, that I had played, and he contacted me and wanted to know if I'd be interested in playing with him. Could I send him some demos or some video of me playing? So I did. I started finding stuff on YouTube with Stryper and sent him some songs that I had played on and some audio, and it's like, that was cool. And then it came about later on, he started realizing that Stryper was kind of a bigger deal than he thought. But you know, I love the guy. He's probably one of the nicest guys I've ever met in the music business. That's, you know, had the success that he's had. And but he flew me up to Montreal. We did he had already recorded the song, but he wanted to do a big video for I'm a Survivor. And so we did that, and the goal was to tour that following summer, well, spring and then summer, and then things just kept getting pushed back, and then next thing you know, we had the COVID thing, and that just kind of stopped everything. I had been recording, so we'd done more videos here, just what he calls the COVID outtakes or whatever, and
Right.
where he would record a song that he had already done previously. We'd do it, re-record it, and then do a video for it. And so we're doing a lot of these home things throughout 2020, and he's kept me kind of busy playing and recording, which is great. And this year we were supposed to again start touring, and the border has been closed. can't get into Canada, or I couldn't get out, or if I did, I'd have to be quarantined for 10 days. And it's just, it got to the point where I couldn't leave home for that long of a time, and with the way things are going right now. So I let him know earlier this year that that I wouldn't be able to make a commitment for the rest of this year. So we'll see what happens. You know, I've done some other recording with him since then, and see what happens if they start opening things up. I don't know. Maybe something will happen, maybe not.
It blessed me, just as a side note, on the I'm a Survivor video, it blessed me. There's John 3:16. It's a kind of an image of the Bible that comes through on it, and I'm like, hey man, that's totally cool, you know. And Timothy, you'd also in 2019, I believe.
He's a believer. He's a good guy. He's a believer.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Wonderful. 2019, you also had recorded with Dean Castronovo, Joey Tafola, and Kevin Gucher on Of Gods and Monsters. I think it was released in March of 2020. It was the Sons of Armageddon album. Timothy, were y'all doing that because I knew you were with Aldo Nova around the same time. Was that kind of a one-album project, or did you all have plans to do something further than that?
Yeah, so I did the stuff with Gian with Faithsedge, and then Kevin from the Gods and Monsters band hit me up if I wanted to do this recording. And so we recorded the album, and we were all in separate places. I did it, you know, here in Phoenix. The other guys were at their respective homes, so we did everything over the internet. Did the album, and there was talk of doing some shows. We did some shows in Texas, and then a year later, or 6 months or so later, we did some more shows in Texas, and did some shows in let's see, Texas, El Paso. We did El Paso, and then we did Tucson, Arizona. And then right about that time is when I remember driving from El Paso to Tucson, and we were hearing about the COVID thing, and they're locking down, I think, Italy at the time. And so everything just kind of came to a halt again, as it has for the music industry.
Right.
And so that was that. We released the album, and great guys. We had a fun time doing it, but I wasn't able to commit again. So I think Kevin's continued on. He's got a whole new version of the band, and we wish him all the best for that. And that's kind of, you know, what I do here is more of recording projects. People will present something to me, and, you know, if I like it, I'll do it. If I don't, you know, I'll pass. And you know, I enjoy recording more than being out and performing live. A little bit has to do with my health, but, you know, I'm in pain a lot. I was diagnosed with Lyme disease in 2008. I didn't at the time realize how bad that was going to be, or what kind of effect it was going to have on me, but it's given me arthritic pain, all my joints. I'm in pain all over. So it really, you know, to stand for a long time, my hips feel like they're going to give out, my knees feel like they're going to give out, and it's just something that's gotten worse and worse over time.
My father-in-law has that.
Yeah, it's
so I can relate.
I didn't want to jump on the bandwagon because it seemed like maybe a year or two ago, everybody was coming out with like their Lyme disease diagnosis. All these people, or Avril Lavigne and whoever else. I mean, there was, you know, it seemed like all these musicians were coming out saying that they had it. So at the time I was like, I don't know if I want to really go out there and start promoting, you know, like a crybaby, like I got it too. That wasn't my intent. So I kind of retracted, you know, I put it out there that I did, just to bring awareness to it. But and then I started seeing everybody else doing it, and I was like, maybe not. I don't really want everybody knowing my business. So.
Hey, Tim, is there anybody from Stryper that you've been able to keep in touch with since you left the last time?
I have not. I haven't talked to anybody since I left in 17.
Okay.
And it's really been since the end of, well, about May of 2017. That was it.
Okay.
Haven't kept up with anybody. I don't talk to them. They haven't tried to contact me, and
Okay.
leave it at that.
So I'd like to say at this juncture, and I'm looking at the time here, and it's probably about time for us to wind down, but Timothy, you mentioned, and just to let our friends out there know, because you're at timothygaines.net. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's your webpage, and you are open to people contacting you for studio session work.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a little contact button or something, you know, one of those little, click on me and it'll bring up just like what happened with you. Contact you, and it'll send me a message that and hopefully it won't get downloaded and put away on a computer that doesn't work anymore. But
So friends out there, for those of you not in the know, we had messaged Timothy, well, it was in December of 2020, and Timothy had a little downloading snafu, something with his computer, changed over computers, and 6 months later he said, "Hey guys, just now saw this, forgive me, I'm still here," and we're just thankful you reached back out to us. It's been a blessing, so thank you for that, Timothy.
yeah, I'm sorry about that. I don't normally do that, but it just happened. So
Hey, Tim, while I got you here, I got to tell you a little story. Ken told you his story earlier about meeting you, and I got to tell you mine.
yeah.
So it's the In God We Trust tour, 1988. I'm 19 years old. You guys are playing in Bismarck, North Dakota at the Civic Center there.
Mhm.
And tour buses parked out back of the building. And me and a buddy of mine are out there by the tour bus hoping to see somebody. And my buddy says to me, "Well, the door right there, there's people going in and out of it. We should just go in there." And I was like, "No, we can't do that. We're going to get tossed out by security or something like that." And he kept prodding me about it. And I finally, all right, let's try. So we just walked in the door and we start walking around the backstage area there. And we see you walking along, eating a sandwich. So we walk up and say hi to you. And you were just as kind and polite as could be and talked to us and offered to get us backstage passes, which you did. And so we got to go backstage after the show and meet all you guys. And so I'm sure you have no memory of that, but it was a real blessing to me in my life, something that happened when I was a young man. And, you know, you were part of that. And I just wanted to say how much I appreciated your kindness toward us, even though we were being kind of out of line. But
yeah, well, you know, and thank you for saying that. Sometimes I don't know, I've had some people say that I have done some weird things to them, and I was like, boy, I wish I could remember. I don't remember your situation, but I'm glad that I took the time to be kind to people back in the day, because I've gone off the rails on some folks more recently, and boy, I regret, like you say something and can't take it back and that kind of a thing. And it's like, I could have led somebody to the Lord or set an example of Christ when I didn't. So when I hear something like that with you, that it's a blessing for me, because I wasn't all that bad. maybe there was some good. So,
Well, Timothy, we're just brothers talking shop here, brothers in Christ. We all, none of us are Christ himself, and
yeah.
I'm not trying to make excuses for me and my faults, and what anybody else's faults might be, but we're all human, and, none of us are perfect. But I'm just thankful, as I know that Rex and Mike are, you have, along with the guys in Stryper, the Lord used you all to minister to us in a great way. And we just really want to say thank you, because we're getting to speak with you today. And thank you so much, Timothy, because you have blessed us, you and the other guys.
Thank you. And thank the Lord, because he's the one.
That's right.
It wasn't me. It was just, I guess, my willingness, our willingness to say yes. But yeah, success, everything that's happened, I give all the credit to the Lord, because there's nothing that I would have done as myself, nothing good. It's all God.
Well, all glory to him. And if you don't mind, Timothy, Mike, he's actually he's received a recent pastorate of a Lutheran church where he's at. And so
Awesome.
He's our resident pastor. But we just like to keep the main thing, which is the Lord and his word. And we kind of do a scripture closeout. So, Mike, if you wouldn't mind doing a scripture closeout for us, buddy.
Sure. My scripture today, which I think is good for all of us as we approach new seasons of life and take on new things, and the Lord gives us new things to do, comes from Isaiah 40, verse 31. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint.
So
Awesome. And it's so true.
So, Timothy, we thank you for gracing us. Thank you so much for spending a little time with us. We are genuinely appreciative. And friends out there, again, it's timothygaines.net. That's Timothy's webpage, and he does studio tracking for musicians and stuff. And anyway, we'll just sign off. And if you don't mind, Timothy, hang around for one more minute after we sign off. So thank you, everybody, for watching.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.